What comes next is really horrible. This is Nelly, Ordinary People, Saintly Souls. And what Maria Valtorta saw next almost needs a trigger warning because it is so awful. They tie Jesus to a bar that is hanging about 3 meters, which is, I think, about 10 feet from the floor. And they take off his clothes. He has only, let's say, short linen underwear and his sandals. And he stands on his toes. And then on each side of him stands a man who holds a whip with 7 leather strips that end in small lead hammers. And they start to hit him front, back, front, back, front, back, in a rhythm that doesn't stop. And at one point, one of the leaders of the Roman troops comes and says, "Stop, he must be alive when he's killed." And at that moment, they stop. And the 2 executioners, he calls them, are just exhausted and say, "Give us our money, and we need something to drink. We're exhausted." And then Jesus just drops down, but he never says a word. He never utters a moan, a cry, nothing. He remains silent. And so then they tell him, "Come, quick, get up. Are you weak? Here are some refreshments." And again, what they mean with the refreshment in this case, they hit him again on his face, between the right cheekbone and the nose, where it begins to bleed. Jesus opens his eyes and looks around, and it is very difficult for him to see because his eyes are full of blood and dust. And they say, "Get dressed. You're so immodest. You lewd man." Of course, he didn't undress himself. But what they do then is really very nasty. They start to push his clothes away. So every time he wants to take up his clothes, they kick them away and he has to bend over again. And, we can only imagine how bending over must have hurt him after his back was completely open from the flogging with metal little hammers or little bullets or whatever you call it. So then Jesus sits down and he starts to shiver. And he clearly has a fever because he has lost so much blood by now and he's very thirsty. And at that point, they sit again, and again, one of them gets bored and says, "What shall we do now?" And said, "Oh, wait, the Jews say that he tells them he's a king. Let us make him a crown." And so they make the famous crown made of thorns. But what is very painful is that first they make it too big, they put it on his head and it falls down, so they rip it off again. Then they make it too small, so they press it in his head and they have to rip it off again till it fits. So twice already his head is wounded by those thorns. And so then they give him a cane in his hand, but before they giving him the cane, the scepter, they beat his head with it. And then they tell him to go and sit on his throne, which is an upside down tub or a bucket that is used for the water of to water the horses. And again, he's brought back to Pilate. And again, Pilate thinks that now it's time to let him go. He has suffered enough. He has been, he's almost beaten to death. It comes down to that. But the people, as we know, don't let him. And they demand to see Jesus. And Jesus is so moved by the whole situation that tears start to come out of his eyes. But somehow, instead of compassion, this causes the crowd to be more hateful. And again, he's taken back to where Pontius Pilate is. And then there is the famous scene where they said, "Death to him, crucify him." And Pontius Pilate gives them the choice between him and Barabbas. And I think that is also the moment where Pontius Pilate's wife has her servant bring him a note, so to speak, saying that he should not be put to death. And Pontius Pilate says, I'm advised to avoid you're being put to death. Is it true that you are more than just a shaman? He uses the word haruspex, which seems to be someone who could read signs. It's like a shaman or a magician or someone with certain powers. You frighten me, says Pontius Pilate. Do you not know that I have the power to free you or to crucify you? And Jesus says, you would have no power if you were not given it from above. Therefore, he who handed me over to you is more guilty than you are. Who is it, your God? Jesus remained silent. Now Pontius Pilate is on tenterhooks. He would like and he would not like to. He's afraid of God's punishment. He's afraid of Rome. He's afraid of the revenges of the Jews. For a moment, he overcomes the fear of God and he goes to the front of the hall and in a thundering voice he says, he is not guilty. And then they say, well, if you say so, you are no friend of Caesar's. He has proclaimed himself a king and we are going to tell Caesar that you freed him. Well, Pontius Pilate does not like that. So then he changes his mind and he goes back to his little throne and he calls the centurion Longinus and he orders them to write a note on a board. Doesn't say what the board is made of. Jesus Nazarene, King of the Jews, that famous board. And so that is where Jesus is left before the trip to Golgotha starts. And Jesus comments on this, and I want to just tell you a tiny bit of the comments. Here he says that John is the most accurate of the witnesses and that his narration is the most accurate of what happened. And he says that, they could have stoned me. Why did they want me crucified? They could have killed me by stoning. That's what they did to the first martyr, Stephen. Because although the crucifixion was the Roman punishment, but that did not keep them from killing people in all kinds of other ways. And he also talks about Pontius Pilate. He said that I was really an enigma to him. He couldn't make anything out of me. He didn't understand me at all. And then Jesus has a long reflection about who Pilate was and what he actually believed in. But this is Jesus' conclusion about Pilate. Pilate is a false good man. But Longinus is good. Longinus the centurion, who was in charge of crucifying him, because although Longinus was less powerful than Pilate and less defended, in the middle of the street and surrounded by a few soldiers and a hostile multitude, he dared to defend me. He dared to help me, grant me a rest. He allowed me to be consoled by the women who followed me to Golgotha, to the cross. And he allowed me to be assisted by Simon of Cyrene, who carried the cross when Jesus no longer had the power or the strength to do so. And finally, Longinus allowed my mother to be near the cross, under the cross. He was a hero of justice, and so he became a hero of Christ. So now in the next video, I will first tell you about the death of Judas, and after that we will see Jesus going to be crucified. This was Nelly, Ordinary People, Saintly Souls, reading from the Visions of Maria Valtorta. Thank you for listening.